Okay, Merry Christmas to all of you. I would like to thank you for coming to our retirement celebration. I'm very grateful that you all could make it, especially during this busy time of the year and coming from far away, like Rebecca, for instance, and others. Of course, behind each great paper there is a ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter of this speech is Karen. Karen did all the research, and I am just reading it, and it is all true. So the first retirement which we want to celebrate tonight is Maria, my daughter Maria, who's in Canada. And I would like to start out by recognizing her on her recent retirement. She received her BA from Western Michigan University, and her first career position as an employment counselor was at a grassroots organization called the Working Center in Kitchener, where I taught, and that is how she got the contact to Canada. Following this position, Maria did the most important job of raising 3 wonderful children for 9 years, and my great-grandchild, Wally, has just been born. So the whole family from Rosie to Wally.
What was that name? Wally?
Literally,
Germans use that word.
Then in 1992, Maria returned to university to pursue a social work degree and provincial licensing, and she worked for 1 year with St. Thomas University in the capacity of campus minister. And I was there 1 year as a chair there, and so we worked together at that time. Then she worked 3 years as a counselor with the Transition House, which is a residence for battered women. Maria always had this feeling for women who were treated very badly, already here in Kalamazoo, and she carried that with her to Canada. Followed by 3 years with the Sexually Assault Center as a social worker. Maria's finally 23 years of service were with the Community Mental Health Center, providing therapy and support services to folks 65 years and older, or 92 and older, with mental illness. Over the years, there was some overlap with education and other jobs, and at times Maria was working 2 jobs and going to school at the same time. We were there in Fredericton when Maria did her examen, and it was really hectic, and Maria was very brave in all these activities. Maria remarried in 2013 and became a stepmother of 2 special kids, Matt and Shannon. Maria is most proud of her children and the compassionate, peaceful, loving adults they are, not to mention the 4 grandchildren. Maria can now enjoy more time with her husband. Okay, the husband is important. He is an Anglican priest, and he was her boss for many years before they finally got married. And now comes our next person who has to be recognized, and that is Karen, who wrote this whole paper. Karen, whom I have known for 34 years, she I have to be truthful, she retired at the end of June with 30 plus years of teaching. In the fall semester of 1985, Karen took one of my classes called Psychological Elements in Religion. That is the most stolen course of mine in the States, in this country. It has been stolen from Florida to San Francisco and so on. And there will be a book out of it, which Karen and I will do together, because she is this great pedagogue, and this will be a book for schools, so for normal people. I announced.
Karen's going to help with that part.
She's the normal one.
So I announced in class that I was looking for a student to live in my home and help out with cooking and cleaning. The prehistory of that is when my dear wife Margie died, she hoped that there would be a friendly woman coming along to help. Well, Karen was this friendly woman 34 years ago. She came after Steve went to law school, then Karen took over and has taken over ever since. Karen was very interested and met with my daughter Agnes, and she was hired and started in January 1986 and lived in the basement with a mouse. And then slowly advanced to the rooms up there until she came to the top of the whole organization. Karen lived at the House of Peace and helped out in many different capacities until graduating from Western Michigan University in 1987. Sometimes Karen also lived together here with her sister, and sometimes with Aggie together. So, and altogether, I don't know, we had 20 or so students, and Reika was one of them too. Where is Reika? There is Reika. Reika, you don't have a chair.
Oh, I'm
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Karen went on to complete her master's degree in education administration at Michigan State University. She graduated in 1992. She also had Morgan that same year. Karen started her teaching career with Traverse City Public Schools in 1994. She taught there 2 years, then moved downstate after she met Ken. Our great brother Ken is sitting over here. She was hired into Huron Valley School District and taught for 1 year and became an administrator for 2 years. She was recruited by an administrator from Birmingham Public Schools and hired into the district in 2000. She went back into the classroom to teach at both the middle and elementary school. She retired in June of this year. She got credit toward retirement for all the educational positions she held prior to teaching, so she was able to retire with 30.8 years of service. During the 34 years together, now is an important thing that Karen broadened her education, her pedagogical activity into our enterprise here, and later on also Ken entered this. I could not have taught that long without Karen and Ken, who were helpful in this. So all her administrative genius and educational genius Karen broadened into a worldwide scope here in the House of Peace. During the 34 years together, Karen and I traveled all around the world together. We opened up these in Dubrovnik and in Yalta and so on. And we had many exciting education and memorable adventures along the way. In 1987, we traveled to Frankfurt, Germany, my hometown, and then to Dubrovnik, Croatia, where we have this international course on the future of religion, which is now 43 or 44 years old. She brought along another student, Katie Cagney, who is now in Chicago, and that she probably teaches there somewhere. She got her PhD there. These were very, very dangerous times. We drove through the Alps, and Karen knew how to drive a Volkswagen, also backward and forward, but Katie did not. Very small ways with mountains on the right and the left, and a bus down on the other side. And Karen took pictures of the whole thing, and I went from one anxiety attack to the next. This was my graduation present to Karen. 1988, Frankfurt, we went to Frankfurt again, and to Dubrovnik. In Frankfurt we visited my relatives, and of course saw Frankfurt itself and where I grew up and all this. In 1989 we went to Israel and Greece, and in Israel we were searched by the Mossad, the secret service of the state, and Karen was in a separate room and I'm in a separate room. And I said, my God, she always says the truth, it will be a catastrophe. Nevertheless, somehow it fit. We were at the same time, same place, and so on. In January 1993, Karen drove me to Fredericton, New Brunswick, in a blizzard, where I was hired to serve as chair at St. Thomas University, where also Nick went, Nicholas and where also Maria worked. On the way, my car lost its heating system, so we had to stop and get repairs done in the middle of this horrible snowstorm. And so poor Karen froze up there And I had to warm her up in order to be able to drive on, and we asked for some place, and then we were told it was some kind of a village, and the village was invisible. It was just all under the snow. It was horrible. So nevertheless, we found a small French-speaking family who owned a repair shop, and they cooked a wonderful soup, and we were somehow made normal there in this horrible storm. Thank goodness the family fed us and took good care of us. After the repair, Karen drove us through a blizzard to Fredericton, a small street with these big trucks coming down and nothing visible at all in the snow. We had dinner with Maria's family. Finally, we got there at 12 o'clock of the night or so in state, and the bed and breakfast, which was spooky. There was an old lady with her son, and it was just, she was out of the Middle Ages, but we survived the whole thing. So, right, and then Karen flew home the next day in a tiny little plane in the middle of a snowstorm, and she didn't even know where she was flying. She may have gone to Washington before she got to Detroit or whatever. The pilot did not even know exactly where he was going. So this was nevertheless a great experience, and it was really dangerous, the whole thing. In 2007, Karen and I traveled to Oxford, England, where I presented at Oxford University, where, by the way, one of my books was globally known, which was very nice among all these scholars. It is then my lost cousins, wanted to make it a bestseller, and he went to Peter Lang in Switzerland and said, "This is material for a bestseller." And Peter Lang said, "No, we are honest people. We are not in the best-selling business." And so he did not make a bestseller, but another American or English edition. This Peter Lang is also, they never tell you what they do with the money they steal from you. So I am the one who is working, and they get the money and I get the honor. So that is also with Peter Lang. So I said once, "What did you do with all the money which I produced?" And he said he bought an orphanage. So I have an orphanage in England. I said, "Could you not have asked me if I want to have an orphanage or not?" I said, "I like orphanages, but I would have like to have known that I had an orphanage." So that was Peter Lang. He's retired too now. We visited castles and ate wonderful food in the English countryside. We then traveled to London, where we got stranded over the weekend to a strike. A pleasant labor union somehow organized a strike with British Airways, and we made the best of the time and saw 3 famous Broadway shows, Les Miserables and Phantom of the Opera and The Lion King. And the airlines paid for our hotel and the performances, as well as food for the weekend. So labor unions are really great people. That is why I came here. As soon as I came here, I founded a labor union. By the way, when you look over there, the governor of the state told in a document all my great deeds, and she forgot the labor union, in spite of the fact that she's a Democrat. Then you can see how bad things are. The airlines nevertheless paid for everything. Karen had to struggle, as always, with the manager of the airlines to get us a seat in order to fly back to the United States on Monday. She stood her ground, as always, at the counter until they agreed without any additional $850, which they want to have. So Karen is a wonderful negotiator. Deal maker, much better than the chief now. In 2016, we traveled to Frankfurt again to visit my relatives, my niece Carola and dear sister-in-law Lieselotte drove us to Geyser. That is a strange word. It's a small town. It was in the death zone between the German Democratic Republic and the German Federal Republic, and it was mine. So for 30, 40, 50 years I couldn't go to Geyser, but I grew up in a castle there. My uncle was a judge there, and now it has been made into a hotel. So if I could still go, which I hope there to in May, I would like to go there, and then I could sleep in the same room in which I slept as a little fellow. As a matter of fact, the room where I slept with my grandfather, for whom I always made trouble because I told him that he was old and ugly. And then he ran after me as fast as he could. Still, now I feel what he went through with me so late. So, nevertheless, when I was 1.5 years old, I almost died from a lung infection, and it was a Jewish doctor, Ackerman, who recommended that I should be put into ice cold water and into hot water back and forth. And my uncle and my aunt and her maid did that for me, and my uncle thought I would hate women for the rest of my life, which I did not. I was forgiving. But nevertheless, I survived, and Dr. Ackerman was delivered in a concentration camp and was killed. I asked him when we went to Gaza, asked for the people, and nobody could remember him, in spite of the fact that his son had in the meantime moved into his father's position. Okay, so then Niece Carola and dear sister-in-law, Niece Lotte, drove us to Gaza. We traveled further to Dubrovnik and then to Rome. I was the tour guide, and Karen and Ken visited over 50 churches. The truth is that Karen and Ken drove me in a chair through the whole city of Rome, through the whole Vatican with all the good and bad popes. I was going through all these chambers. It was beautiful, but it was hard work, which Ken and Karen had to do. So I have been there in Rome, but it is always a new experience. And last, Dustin and I think we wrote an article about religion, the dialectic of the Roman religion, of utility, and so all our experience went into that article. Has it come out, or will it come out?
Not yet. It's in the last stages.
There's always hope. Okay, then in 2017 we had a wonderful trip to Frankfurt again, and we always went through Frankfurt and then to Dubrovnik and Paris, and the same thing happened. Where Ken pushed me in a little chair through Notre Dame, Sacré-Cœur, and all the one of the famous places, and where the revolution took place. Paris is the city of bourgeois enlightenment. That is why ISIS likes it so much and attacks it. So, because that is the center where our constitution comes from, where all enlightenment, what we have, a little bit we have, all comes from there. We also traveled throughout different states in the United States, as well as to London, Waterloo, and Kitchener, Canada, to visit family and friends, as well as attend conferences and teaching. So I taught many times in Canada, and that is where Maria then got her Canadian connection, so that a third of the family is now in Canada instead of here. We completed the application process for visas in order to travel to Yalta, Crimea in 2017, but due to an executive order by President Obama, we were not able to work in the Crimea. It was not that we could not travel there, but I was forbidden to do anything. That means I founded 20 years ago a course on religion and civil society. It was wonderful, but we asked the university and the lawyer and the general counsel, and we asked the White House even, and we asked also the Treasury Department, what if first all professors were hit by the sanction of Obama, and then we found out that I could not speak before the group, that I could not even Skype before them, that I could not sign, as I usually did, 240 professors whose papers I had to sign so that they would be paid, and so on. Nothing. I could do nothing. I could just sit there. And otherwise, I would be fined millions of dollars, and the university would lose its good reputation. We were always threatened if I would cross the boundary of the Ukraine and to Yalta, then we would be hit and troubled and tortured and whatever. So we did not even plan to go through the Ukraine, but to fly through Moscow and directly. So, but it was a lot of trouble, and it's still going on. And we lost over $2,000 in the whole process. And, but others, like oil, lost much more, into the billions through these sanctions. And these sanctions were made because of the Crimea was attacked by the Russians and annexed. And nobody in the Crimea knows that they have been attacked or annexed. That means an outright lie. It is just a phony type of a thing. And so for this phony type of a thing, not the Russians, but we had to suffer because we couldn't go there. So Dustin was with me too in the Ukraine, and also who else was with me there?
I was. Rosie.
Huh?
I was.
You were with me,
you
yeah,
went too.
and Stevie.
You went too.
Stevie went
Steve
with me, and yeah. We completed the application process for visas and so on, and then we could not go. Okay, now after this beautiful two retirees and their recognition, I come to myself, and I said a few things already, and you know that, so let me just go very shortly as far as my early retirement story is concerned. I'm very sorry that I had to retire so early, but it was Dr. Lapena, who is a really good friend of mine, but sometimes the friends are doing the worst to oneself, so he stopped me. Okay, no less, in 1933, that is when Hitler came into power, I went to the elementary school in Frankfurt, a suburb of Kienheim, and so when I was there, maybe a year or two, President Hindenburg died, and then Hitler took total power. He became president and chancellor and leader all together. And so the whole drama, the German tragedy, started at that time. Then in 1938, I went over to the Lessing Gymnasium. My mother, who was a very simple, beautiful person, but she didn't know what a humanistic elite gymnasium was. So they wanted to put me into a trade school where I could become a banker, and I threatened suicide. I put myself on a little railroad near Geyser. The train came only once a day, but nevertheless, I was sitting there waiting for it, and that was so impressive for my environment that they said we have to send him to the humanistic gymnasium. So that is how I did not become a banker.
I did not become a what?
Okay,
Which may have saved global banking.
Banker. A banker.
Thomas is not here. He would have sang hallelujah. Okay, so then, about 1943, when I was not even through that Lessing Gymnasium, when I was 15, then I joined the Air Force, and I defended Frankfurt and the Rhine-Main area, which stretched to Berlin, to Cologne, and to Kaiserslautern and Mannheim and so on. And in that process, I shot down, unfortunately, 18 bombers, which means 12 people in each bomber, and I hope that that all of them came down, which happened all the time, that the Germans had innumerable American pilots there, so they did come down. I never know exactly who comes down and so on, but I hope that all 18 crews came down safely. And then I came to the army, where I shot 2 tanks down, and they did not come out of it, which shows the horrible tragedy of the thing that in the battle, it was the Battle of Aschaffenburg, which was completely meaningless strategically or any other way. And it was just a mobbing up operation, and Patton sent the tanks into the wrong place at the wrong time. And so it was in Alsenau, it was the city of Alsenau, where also then I lost my whole company, 250 men whom I visited every summer from Frankfurt, and they were still there, their helmets were there, their wires were camouflage and so on. So this shows, whoever tells you a story that there was something nice about any kind of a war, there is a book here which I just got about the Second World War. There is nothing nice about anything of that. It's only for those who come home and then tell heroic fairy tales. Okay, so that was the army then, where I was in officer school. I was supposed to go to Russia and kill whatever atheistic Bolsheviks, and so Hitler marched with 4 million men into Russia and killed 26 million Russians, poor farmers, and 6 million Jews. It is good that we remember the 6 million Jews. We should remember them all the time. There is one friend of us who is with us tonight, whose parents will be recognized for having been in Auschwitz and so on. So we certainly must remember our Jewish brothers and sisters, but we must not forget the 26 million Russians. So the real war took place in the east, not in the west. So Eisenhower had 60,000 men with whom he fought. In Moscow in the first winter, 10 million men were fighting in Moscow. And the army in Stalingrad, Paulus' army, was over 1 million men. That means the double of the Eisenhower army. So we should not forget what has happened on the other side just because they were communists or whatever. So nevertheless, I was, then I had to surrender, and I surrendered to General Patton and to the Canadian Army in the forest around Eisenhower, where I had thrown him out just a few days before. He just came back with more power, and but there was something very funny happening while I surrendered and gave my weapons to him. I had a sergeant, he was an Austrian, and he pulled out of his jacket an Austrian flag and said he had never been in the German army. He was in the Austrian army. There had not been an Austrian army for 10 years. So all the Canadians and all the Americans just laughed themselves to death about the whole thing. I would have shot this guy if I still had a revolver there. It was a really impressive moment for me. I never saw him again afterwards, the Austrian fellow. Okay, so nevertheless, I was then shipped through Germany and through Frankfurt and Cologne and not Cologne, no, Worms, and in Worms for a whole week I didn't get anything to eat. I found out how long you can live without food there. So it was not the fault of anybody, because, and I never complained to the military government about, I complained about other things, but because the problem was enormous. There was the American army, and then there were all these Germans who surrendered, who didn't want to go to the Russians. So they all went to the West, and suddenly the British and the Americans had all these prisoners at hand that nobody could, logistically, could handle that adequately. So nevertheless, then I went to Marseille, and on the way we went to Alsace-Lorraine. Alsace-Lorraine was sometimes German, sometimes French, now it was French again. So therefore, those Germans who were now French again, they wanted to show that they were good Frenchmen. And so when I was driven in an animal car with other prisoners, and with a small window, I looked through the window and we were stoned, so I became unconscious. And the Protestant minister took his last water he still had and woke me up again. And since that time, I am ecumenical. I love the Protestants. Many around here, so, and they are lovely people. So then I went in Marseille, and there was something strange. Sometimes, you know, history is very contingent. Every day people were marched to the coast in order to put 100 people to put little pebbles on each other, so little heaps of stone. And and one day I thought, well, maybe I could do something too. So I went and was the last man in 100 group there. And we marched and marched, but we never got to the beach. I thought that was one group made the heap and another group undid the heap, because you have to keep people busy somehow. So, but they didn't go anywhere. The group didn't go anywhere. And until we came to a ship, a Liberty ship. Liberty ships were ships which had no names, only numbers. And they could only cross the ocean 5 times and they would sink automatically. So nevertheless, I was put on that ship, and it was shipped to Africa, and there we thought we would build roads or whatever, but then the ship was put together with 25 other ships, and we went through Gibraltar and went across the Atlantic Ocean. So on the way there were 2 U-boats suddenly appeared, the periscopes came out of the water, and the sirens, all 25 ships, the sirens, and the captain put lovingly the prisoners along the railing, because he thought that the Germans would not shoot at them if they saw that they were German prisoners. They didn't know what German U-boat commanders were like. So, but they didn't want to fight anymore. They had Nazis with them to go to Argentina, where all the friends were, and so they just were diving again and disappeared. So finally we got to Norfolk, and the first time in 5 years that I saw a little city with light, because all the cars which had lights or whatever, everything was dark during the war. So Norfolk suddenly was there with all its lights, and it was a tremendous experience. And so then I was put into a camp, and I was an officer, so I didn't have to work, but I volunteered for work. And so I was put into a cafeteria where I made hamburgers for the GIs and their girlfriends at night when they went to the movie. But then I let every 10 hamburger go into my pocket. We had these big pockets, and it was full of hamburgers, which I took home to the camp. Because the camps were fed well during the war, but then the war ended and there was no German government after Chancellor Dönitz. And so there was no partner anymore, and they were not really bound by the New York Convention anymore. But they still, I mean, the food was 100 times better still than all over Europe, but it was much less than they had before. So they felt hungry, and therefore I took those hamburgers home. Until the owner of the thing discovered that the hamburger had disappeared again. And so I was fired. So then they put me into the harbor, where I drove a little truck by which I boxes with clothing or whatever, where I carried them with my little car over to the railroad car. And there was a law that every box which would fall, the content belonged to the prisoners. So I made sure that every 10th box was falling down, and but that became too much for the army. Finally, too many boxes were falling. So they fired me again. And then I became a librarian in the camp. And there was a Jewish officer, Secret Service officer, and he took me under his wings. So before already, I was there were cross hearings, so they did not torture anybody. That is very important to know this nowadays. They did not torture in order to get information, but they did cross hearings. So my comrade, who had been in Eastern Europe, they wanted to find out if he was a Nazi, if he was a war criminal, or if he was an anti-Nazi. These were the three categories. So they said, what do you do? You were in this company, in this division, you were near Lodz or whatever, or in Poland somewhere, and you drove a truck. What was on the truck? And well, people were in the truck. What kind of people were on the truck? And so suddenly then they crossed him, and they found out that he drove people into that quarry where they were shot and so on. So then he was a war criminal. And with me they asked, because I was in the Catholic Youth Movement in Frankfurt, and we had helped Jewish people, and we had spread letters of Bishop von Galen in Münster, who protested against concentration camps, the only one. And so the Gestapo was behind them, and we came and we had to suffer from it and so on. So they asked back and forth what the name of the Pope was, the history of the Pope, that it was really genuine and was really a leader in this organization. And they knew Frankfurt better than I knew, and they spoke German better than I did. So that is how I then was categorized as anti-Nazi, and then was sent into training camp, where the first time I then came in contact with the critical theory of society of the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School was not in Frankfurt at that time, but they were in New York, at Columbia University. And while Morgenthau in the government of Roosevelt thought that all Germans had been Nazi, so therefore they all should be castrated and Germany should be deindustrialized, he was fired under the influence of the Frankfurt School people and the New School people, which is today the New School University in New York. So the Roosevelt administration, through Mrs. Roosevelt, listened. So she had more influence, very good influence. So Walter Benjamin, whom some of you maybe, there's a picture hanging there, he came to Marseille, and there suddenly was somebody missing whom Mrs. Roosevelt put there. She put there an agent who helped all the Jewish intellectuals who came from Germany to Marseille, helped them up to Portbou, a railroad town, into Spain and through Spain and Lisbon to New York and so on. And when Dr. Benjamin came on that day, Miss Roosevelt lost that man because he, Mr. Roosevelt, wanted to get in contact with the Vichy government of Pétain, that means the Nazi government. The Germans only occupied the northern part of France and set the southern part free under Pétain, who was the famous French general who defended the city of Verdun, where in the First World War 1 million men died from both sides. So this was one of the horrible battles. He had a poor ending after the war. He was sentenced as a war criminal, and he was a very old man already and was treated very badly, but his death penalty was commuted, so he could live his life out there. So, no less that. So the main thing is that I became familiar the first time with these people. The Frankfurt School people had argued that not all Germans were Nazis, and so they selected 20,000 out of 300,000 German prisoners from the Africa Corps and educated them to send them back to Germany in order to make out of the fascist government a liberal government, which is very easy to do. So, and the other way around is also very easy to do. So, nevertheless, this the Italians had 100,000 prisoners from the Africa Corps too, and also from them, so the people were sent back. So I was sent back home then to Germany finally, and after the time I was free during this time. There was no barbed wire, and it didn't make sense anyway to walk away. So when prisoners broke out of the prison, they just let them go because they got hungry somewhere, and when they would steal something, they would be caught and brought back again. So nobody cared when somebody ran away. And nobody was punished because it is a fundamental human right that you can eat. And so there is no punishment for this. Also that a prisoner will liberate himself is taken as a human right, and so nobody is punished for that, if it is a normal government. So, nevertheless, I was then sent home, and on the way home, a mistake was made. The Liberty ship, as I said, has no names; it has only numbers. So they put the wrong number, the Nazis on the wrong number, or us, or whatever. The Nazis went home to Frankfurt, and the anti-Nazis went to Le Havre and then to Bolbec, where there was an American concentration camp for SS-men. So I had been together with SS-men sometimes before, but never so close. So when we came to the American officer who played with his dog, he looked like an SS-man himself. And so he took all the cigarettes away from us and all the chocolate, which we had to use to go to Frankfurt and go to the black market, because you cannot have democracy without eating first. So, and then we said, we are anti-Nazis. The Germans were all anti-Nazis. So I then spent 3 weeks in that camp. When I came to the tent, it was underwater. The 3 men were dead, and they had not even told the chief that they were dead because they wanted to have their rations. They wanted to have their food. And so then the doctors came, and we were well fed. So we were supposed to go into the mines, work as miners, which is against the Geneva Convention, but even more so to go to the Normandy and pick up the mines where they lost the maps or never got the maps. And so every few minutes, somebody blew up and lost his arm or leg or his life. So, but it didn't get that far with me, because they found out after 3 weeks, the State Department was our number. And so I was then put on the railroad and went back to Heilbronn, and then from Heilbronn to Frankfurt, and I went to Eisenhower headquarters there, and then from then on I started my work, which I was educated for. So, but first, before I did this, in Frankfurt, I came back, and the whole city destroyed, 80%, all of the German cities were destroyed to 80%. But my house had not, my mother's house had not been destroyed. It was close to the IG Farben building, which was the biggest chemical concern, 100 times bigger than Upjohn or whatever. So that, because we were close to that building, and they didn't bomb that building because they wanted to have it as an administration building. There was another thing which they didn't bomb, that was the railroad station. They didn't destroy it completely because they want to use the rails. And then there was also a hotel in Frankfurt, which they kept because they wanted to live there. So it was all very well planned, the whole thing. Okay, so I did my Abitur then in the Lessing Gymnasium, and then I went to the University of Frankfurt in 1947, and then 1950, the University of Münster, and where there was a famous professor who was a Catholic professor who the first time said the truth about Luther after 400 years. And but I found out later on that he was a Nazi, a fascist, which they were all hiding at that time, and then there were some problems. 1953, then I went to Catholic University and studied there a year. In 1954, I began to teach. So that is how the retirement finally started. The teaching at the gymnasium, and then also at trade schools, which made it possible that people who had a trade, were printers or whatever, they could then make the step to the university. They had to choose one discipline, but that the socialists had invented that, because what happened with me, I was with 11 years old, I was stamped as an elite person, that means the 10% who could think, and the socialists broke that so that when you had a trade, then you could still get out, you could still get into the university, to visit the university. Okay, so then 1959, I went then from Dieburg, which was south of Frankfurt, to Meschede, which was north of Frankfurt, and in 1962, I went then started teaching in Baltimore. So by 1960 or so, the Frankfurt School had predicted that that Trumpism would appear. That was here in the newspapers. They said in New Yorker that the Frankfurt School was the only one who knew that Trumpism would be coming. So at that time, I had gone back and forth between Europe and here, and I thought at that time that the fascism would be more of a danger here than it would be over there. If a smaller country like Germany could ruin the whole universe, what could America do if it would turn into fascism? So that's why we came over here in 1962, and there was all the turmoil, of course, and the assassination of Kennedy and so on. So this was the reason, and it was the reason why I built also the future studies. The governor mentions that I founded this Center for Future Studies, but she forgot to say that it was repressed. It was repressed because I had too many foreigners in there. In reality, it was repressed because of the predictions which we made about the development of the country. So, nevertheless, in 1965, we went from Baltimore to here, came to here, and it was for the Jesuits for whom that happened, Father Harden, John Harden. There is something very peculiar happened here, and as Ken always said, we flew under the radar. We did fly under the radar all the time, and I have to apologize for that, but it was too complicated, the whole thing. So Siebert and Vice President Siebert and Miller and Cornelius Lowe, the dean, they were all Presbyterians, and they wanted to have a theology department in a state school. How that could be possible was not entirely clear, because the Constitution doesn't have the name of God. The Constitution is agnostic and atheistic. Only the Declaration of Independence has the name of God, and that is a deistic God who has left the world, is not known either. So you cannot have a state with an atheistic constitution and then have universities, state universities, which teach about God, which theology is. So it was not possible, but they did make it possible. So I was invited as a Catholic theologian. And when you see in the university registers, I taught Catholic theology. And I was supposed to do that with Father Hahn. Father Hahn was very successful, extremely right-wing Catholic. So right-wing that he was not allowed to teach anymore by the church in Chicago and Detroit anymore, and almost was a member of the pious group which had been excommunicated and was taken back again by Benedict XVI. And then one of them in the airport in Frankfurt said that the Holocaust never happened. He was still a Nazi. And then flew away to London, otherwise they would have put him into prison in Germany, because it's against the law in Germany to deny the Holocaust. So, nevertheless, this was our story there with Father Harden, and an unfair thing happened to him, because he was sent to Baltimore, where I taught with the Jesuits, to bring me over in order to cooperate with him. In reality, he was sent in order to replace him. He brought in his own replacement. So after a short time as I was here, he was fired. It was a big scandal in the Detroit newspapers, and Father Harden protested against it, and finally also said that I had fired him because the newspaper said that the decision was unanimous, which was not true. They said that formally, but I was not here during that time. I had another job in down south of Chicago, where I was supposed to become a chair, and I didn't expect it, but I wasn't there. So that is Father Harden, and it shows what our critical theory is all about. Namely, we are about the culture wars. The culture wars, that was one of them. The culture wars are rooted in the antagonism between the religious and the secular, which then also splits the religious communities. So you can see that then you have right-wing Catholics and you have left-wing Catholics. I brought all the left-wing Catholics here into town. The Baum was a Gregory Baum. He was a consultant in the Second Vatican Council. I also brought in Hans Küng, who is still alive. He was also in the council as well. And then one who just died, Metz, Baptist Metz. We were all three great friends, and we had one great Protestant, that was Moltmann, and I brought him here too. So they were all members of the new ecumenical paradigm of Christianity, and they think all four of them have been forgotten in the meantime. I ask sometimes around, and nobody can remember anymore that they were even here. So nevertheless, we tried to do this, and so Father Harden was an example of that split in the Roman Catholic Church, which has now surfaced again. As you know, there was a synod discussing priestly celibacy and to have a married priesthood, and there is the danger here of a schism in the American Church. When you see the Catholic television shows and see people going to communion, there are still some who take the host in their mouth. These are the right-wing Catholics. Others take it into their hands. It's like the nuns. There was a nun here today. You wouldn't know that she was a nun. They are council people, but others still put the whole thing back again. So that is the split inside of the Roman Catholic Church, to open up toward the word, toward discourse, and or not to open up to the word, and like Benedict did, faith. Okay, so Father Harden now, the right-wing Catholics in St. Louis Diocese want to make him into a saint. He's supposed to be canonized. So he baptized Maria. No, he baptized Jeannie. And so it could be Jeannie, that it could happen that Jeannie was baptized by a saint. But Weston asked me what they should do about this saint now. And they said, you are better quiet, because otherwise you are the first university who fired the saint. That will be famous and infamous. I believe that. Okay, so nevertheless, that was our coming here, 62, 65, and then 1966, 76. I did summer teaching in Canada, so we went every summer and taught one semester there. And it was a wonderful time. We had a house which was big enough, which was good, and we could take vacations in the second semester. So we did that for about 10 years, and I also introduced those Dubrovnik courses. There was one great fellow, co-ed fellow, Ivan Supek, a wonderful friend of mine, a real humanist. And Supek was supposed to build the bomb for Yugoslavia, not for Tito, but for the government, and he refused. We have in our industrial park, we have a statue of Einstein, and I always suggested that one should balance the war criminal Einstein by Ivan Supek, who had the courage to deny it and not to write a letter to Dubrovnik, a letter to Roosevelt that there was a wonderful bomb inside which one could build, and then of course writing a letter 5 minutes before Roosevelt died that they should never use it. I mean, who military guy will not have a weapon which he doesn't use when the occasion comes? So, but it would be nice to have a balance for the students to see somebody who is a war criminal and responsible for the thing that we have there today, and to balance it by somebody who was brave enough to. Ivan Supek was the student of Heisenberg, which was the scientist who built the bomb for Germany. When Heisenberg in August in 1945 heard that the bomb had been thrown over Hiroshima, he said, "It cannot be. It cannot be. They cannot have done it. It's not possible." And but he forgot that all his Jewish friends had left him and went to the States and fixed it here. So nevertheless, this Ivan Supek studied under him, and then the Gestapo came someday and said he was a British spy. They put him to prison, but Heisenberg had great influence, so he went there and said, "You cannot be a spy." And so the Gestapo changed it, and the Gestapo officer said, "So Ivan, where will you go now?" Ivan said, "I'll go home. My father is in Zagreb and he has cancer." They said, "Don't go home, don't go home. These are inferior people." And then Ivan said, "But you have a whole army down there of Croatians who are in the SS. So, well, it's just an inferior SS. So you could never get anywhere with those people." Nevertheless, he did go home, Ivan Supek, and he joined the partisans. But interesting enough, he joined Tito's partisans, but he never became a communist. And not being a communist, he nevertheless became the president of the University of Zagreb and built the school, the university center in Dubrovnik. So, and by now being a peace man, he came here and he invited us. And Ronnie Lowe went first, and then I went in 1975, and then we founded that course 43, 45, whatever years ago. So that is the history of Dubrovnik, and it was astonishing, the university here. This is this right-wing country, and at that time Yugoslavia was communist. So in spite of that, we could follow that invitation so you can see how liberal the university was in comparison to its environment. Okay, so then we had the 1966, then of course Canada teaching in Dubrovnik, and then I taught also 1978, 1979 when Margie died. I taught in King's College in London, and from 1980, 1984 I was teaching in the German Democratic Republic, the University of Rostock, which was the most peculiar type of a thing, because Rostock, that was East Germany, that was totally Protestant. So since 400 more years, they never had seen a Catholic theologian. They did not even know what that was. So I taught in the Protestant theological faculty of a communist country as a Catholic theologian. That was
nice.
Okay, so I did very well, and I had a very good time. But this is very strange. We had a priest here from Slovenia. Slovenia is a Catholic country with a socialistic government, but all the universities have theology departments. But when he came here, they did not deal with him very friendly. I was the only one who took him into my class. So there is something, it seems that the bourgeois enlightenment is sometimes more radical than even the socialistic enlightenment is. So one should study that, how that happened. And that is why we had to fly under the radar, because Father Harden lasted for 4 years, I lasted for 54 years, and that was a wonderful accomplishment. Sometimes they say that I was a Jesuit and the most dangerous of all of them, but that was not true. Okay, so then that was the Russian the things there in the East Germany and so on. So I was there the year before the wall fell, in the year when the wall fell, and so I went through all of the death sufferings at that time. It was annexed, when we talk about annexation, East Germany was annexed. So the German constitution, there was a clause that in case of reunion, that both countries should have a constitutional meeting and association and decision in which both countries would be treated equally and so on. In reality, East Germany was annexed, and all the professorial shares were stolen by Western professors. The Geyser there, where I grew up, that castle, had been the center of occult shows with thousands of animals. And now those occult shows workers, they thought, well, now we become capitalistic workers, get more money. No, the people came from Denmark and Sweden, bought it up and slaughtered all the animals and got rid of the competition. So it's horrendous what happened in this transition. But Kohl, he was the chancellor in the West, he thought that is a unique moment and we have to take it, and if we wait longer then it will not work, and so on and so on. So that's how it happened. There were some good reasons why it happened and so on, but it was a miserable type of regime change. 25 of them we have had since 1945. Okay, so this teaching, then I was the chair in the religion department in St. Thomas University for a year, and then 2000 I founded the international course in Yalta on the what is called the religion and civil society. Behind there is also a whole story. When the communist revolution was made in 1917, 18 in St. Petersburg, and Lenin drove with the car from Helsinki over to and took over in the fall, Russia had not been developed very well. It was far behind Germany, which was far behind France, which was far behind England and the United States. And so no bourgeoisie had developed, and so it was a very precarious situation. And then, of course, they did not make it easy for the government. So the 12 capitalistic countries marched in to Russia in order to kill Lenin, and the 8,000 Americans are still buried in Murmansk today from that escapade. And then came, of course, Hitler with his counter-revolution, and then finally came the neoliberal counter-revolution, purely financial one, which was hard to take. So, and before we had, of course, Napoleon marching in with 800,000 men, and before that the Crusaders marched to Novgorod and butchered in the children and up to they came to Novgorod. If the NATO says today they feel attacked or whatever, it's not the others who attacked. They are now standing in the Ukraine, and not the Russians in Cuba or whatever. So there is this, I have some Russian friends in Washington who have an institute. They all fled communism, but they correct the American propaganda every day and show what is it called, false narrative now, in order to make the narrative straight. Okay, so that is, I have come to my early retirement then, I think. I think that's it. So, but the reason why I did that in Yalta, that I want to complete that at least. So I thought that it would be good that that Russia would have a recovery revolution of the kind that they would introduce between the family and the state as we have it, a civil society. I don't think Trump is very much aware that there is a difference between the two, but nevertheless, there's a difference between the citizen and the bourgeois. The bourgeois is for his private good, the citizen is for the common good. They are two completely different people. So, nevertheless, in the socialistic time, the civil society was repressed by the Soviets. And if you repress them, you have no screwdrivers, you have no hammers, and your hotels look miserable and so on. So you do need the civil society, but not like here where the civil society eats up the state, but the civil society which is at the same time under control, and we have some controls of course, but obviously not enough. So that is what we wanted to do. So that is why I cooperated there. that they would have introduced or strengthened at least the civil society, and what role religion then would play in the civil society. So kind of it would be productive. There's good and bad religion, and that they wouldn't introduce bad religion as we have it here to a large extent. So nevertheless, that is my retirement, and I would like to thank my family. I'm very proud of my family, of their love and of their successes which they had. It's enormous because they had to grow up without a mother, which is irreplaceable. A mother cannot be replaced, father cannot be replaced. So therefore that was a heroic thing what they did all together, and we all are very proud of them. And then I thank all my friends who have worked with me through the years. Then there's Dustin here. There's of course Karen, most of all. All my books and so on would not have been written without Karen. So therefore, and all our group and the Colonial Kitchen, an unhappy name, the Colonial Kitchen, but they have to go there because they have the room there. So nevertheless, and you all know what great things we did, particularly then with our critical theory of religion. That's a little bit hard to understand what this is all about. But I want to repeat what I did. We had this wonderful conference on campus, and I think then, of course, also Steve Cowell, and then also Dustin, who organized this whole event. And then I think all the professors who gave papers at that time. So Michael Arthur could not be here today because of Marie-Louise had a health issue. And then Dustin's wonderful paper, and then Nikolaus Budimir, he is that Serb guy who grew up to hate Germans, and I am the first German he ever loved in his life. So it's a wonderful man, Nicholas. And then we have Toby Johnson, and then Professor Lee McCorkley, who has this unbelievable accent, which I cannot even compete with, from the South and so on. So he's a beautiful guy. He was really the student of Tom Lawson. We had two fundamental theory in the department, positivistic one and the critical one. So, and we had wonderful competition. So he was a man from the competition. So I hope very much that we can publish these wonderful papers in our Dustin's new publishing house, which has started already. So Dustin has collected all my early articles, which I've completely forgotten. He went to all the publishers, and they gave it all freely except one who wants to have $1,800 for one article and so on. But there are good people among the publishers, so very good. And then he put on YouTube, all the speeches, and Thomas More. That must be for the years. I think I give different, every year, every semester there was a lecture series. Okay. So then I'm always also grateful that I was allowed to teach and research and publish for half a century with the Jesuits in Baltimore and in Germany, and particularly here then for the long time at Western Michigan University and so on. I think 8 presidents, maybe there were 9, but I can only remember 8. Maybe I forgot the last one because he never answered something. And even more provosts and vice presidents. Not only am I proud to have founded the union, but also that the union was able to fire 3 provosts and fire 1 president who really deserved it. So that shows the tremendous need. When I was here only 2 years, I was a senator, and I saw that the Senate had no power whatsoever. I said, we need a union, and so we got a union, and got wonderful contracts through the years. It was a struggle. Maybe there shouldn't be a union, but when the university becomes a corporation, then you need a union. And that's what we did. Okay, so I'm thanking all these people who have, because 8 of the presidents did help every year with Dubrovnik, with Yalta. It was sometimes a little bit, well, I mean, it didn't really pay for it, but it was a sign that the university stood behind it, and that was important. So, and then I think all my colleagues, of course, and even all the students, for our most fruitful cooperation, because I'm thinking of all the Arabs Arabs, because I was the father of all the Arabs, and I'm still waiting for my camel, which I am supposed to get from the Saudi prince, but maybe we'll get to it someday. And then the students and also all the colleagues, of course, and probably many of the Germans wanted to come, but they are old now. One has lost his mind, and the other one cannot travel anymore, and the other one had no money. The Croats wanted to come, but they didn't have any money. Even the former foreign minister, who's now retired halfway, not even he was rich enough to come. Okay, but there was goodwill. They wanted to come. So I'm most grateful also to all the scholars who helped me consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or otherwise, through many years to develop and to practice our critical theory of religion and society. So that is something which keeps Dubrovnik together and which keeps Yalta together. So people in order to stay together have to have a common greed of some kind to move them, to motivate them, and so on. And that's what the critical theory is. So all the books we wrote, all the articles are development of this one theory. Like Plato developed the theory, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, all the Hegel, whatever. It's always a theory which even Hitler and so on, up to the last day, had this theory of national socialism, and you see how powerful it is now. Even if people cannot spell it out or call it, what does Trump call it now? Principled realism. It calls it principled realism. I don't think he knows what it is, but it is nevertheless, it's a theory which holds people together even if they don't understand it well. And so Hitler would even, shortly before his death, he would say, it will come back again 200 years from now. Well, he was wrong with the timing. The timing was a little bit hard. So therefore, it only took 70 years and it all came back again. So therefore, the opponents of the critical theory, fascism particularly, it has to be taken very, very seriously. Okay, so we hope now for generous donors who will make possible a chair of humanistic research center for the critical theory of religion and society, and we hope that Dustin will be able to take that position. So we will look for a businessman with conscience. Some people tell me that there is 100 billion, but I will look for it nevertheless. So then I would like to conclude here with a short birthday letter, which I read already in our other meeting. So, but some of you were not there, so I want to repeat that. It is my good friend so a student of Jürgen Habermas, and he wrote to my last birthday there. His name is Professor Emeritus Edmund Ahrens from the University of Lucerne in Switzerland, and he sums things up nicely, and I could read it in German because you all know German, but I will make it a little bit easy, and I translated it here, and so I do it in the translated form. And some of you know it already, but it sums things up so nicely that I cannot say it better.
And you want a little drink before
No,
you start
thank
the
you. I will get to it soon, because we want to have a toast, so get ready for a toast, get a drink. So, dear Rudi, I sent to you on your 92nd birthday my cordial congratulations and best wishes. You have, after your legendary 54 years, even for Europe that sounds legendary, at the Western Michigan University, taken early emeritation, according to the at this occasion appearing wonderful and marvelous portrait in the WMU alumni periodical, and there's something else coming out now. So, we worked on it for some time. I think it will come out soon. Approaching conference in your honor, good reason to look back on your achievements with pride and dignity and satisfaction. You have managed under at times very difficult circumstances to let your large family grow up and hold together. He was here, he visited here, and he was in Rosie's place in Chicago. You have mediated to generations of students the critical theory of the Frankfurt School. So that's our real accomplishment here, with which you have been connected as long as few others. Likewise engaged as well as differentiated, that means critical, and you have created an impressive and internationally recognized, even and particularly in India, known and received scientific work. In the United States, there is probably nobody who over decades was so intensely and consequentially and steadfastly and unswaveringly devoted as you to the heritage of the Frankfurt School, and who has represented globally the remaining and sometimes virtually alarming, and that's what we are now, and frightening actuality of the thinkers of the dialectic of the Enlightenment. Adorno's recently, that's a top guy in the Frankfurt School, Adorno's recently out of the estate published Vienna Lectures of 1967 about aspects of the new right-wing radicalism, which came out in 2019, speaks after all volumes, so where the whole prediction is there, where Trumpism is described in detail already so early, but in reality it's 1960 when that was all predicted, and we try to do this here in future studies and make it clear about the whole thing, what was coming, and we studied where the forces would be against this Trumpism coming up with the evangelicals and the Catholics and the universities and the press and so on, and they repressed the whole thing because there were too many foreigners. There was a tremendous upheaval at that time in the Honors College, St. Clark and so on, but they were not able to come through. And it's a great riddle to me how a limited being can know why that was so dangerous. Because there had been a Jew here in 1943 who did the same thing and offered it to 100 American universities, and they all said no, except one where the president wanted to ask the faculty at least. What makes it tick in people's consciousness that they know what is dangerous for the system and what is not, or what is good for the system or not? So nevertheless, she came through. She and the registrar cancelled a big minor with lots of people in it, and not only foreigners. But what foreigners? I mean, I had 84 foreigners in the class in the last years and so on. So that was, of course, the dark side of the whole thing, and I don't want to go into it because the light side, the bright side, was so much more beautiful. Okay, then so this is this dangerous thing there. And he goes on there about the Vienna Lectures of 1967, it's really early, about aspects of the new right-wing radicalism, speaks after all volumes. That is valid not only in relation to the AfD, which is the Nazi party in Germany, and the FPÖ in Austria, which is the Nazi party there. So there is a Nazi party everywhere. But also for Trump. They have not yet won, but they have shaken all these parliaments. And the socialists and the Christian Democrats have a hard time to get them under control, and may not get them under control the next time. You're communicative, and remember that fascism has a theory. The aristocratic principle of nature is a very, very powerful principle. So that if they do sometimes see it doesn't matter very much, they go on. The same thing is true with ISIS. Your communicative and organizational abilities fall in no way behind your scientific achievements. That is witnessed, for instance, by more than 40 years engagement at the IUC, that is in Dubrovnik. Here you managed to bring together, to inspire and to move forward many female and male friends from all parts of the world in Dubrovnik, Yalta, Kalamazoo, and at many other locations. Dear Rudy, for your birthday, I wish you every conceivable good. I thank you for many stimulations and suggestions and impulses which also I have, he belongs to the next generation, which also I have always again experienced in our unforgettable meetings in Frankfurt and everywhere else. I thank you for your 40-year friendship, and I wish you in the circle of your family joy, health, happiness, God's blessing. His wife died from a heart attack in Africa on an elephant hunt, and so he's a widower since several years himself. I add a small text which soon appear in the Italian periodical Topologic in an issue which is devoted to the memory and remembrance of Karl Otto Appel. So Otto Appel and Habermas is just for the work of religion out of 2 volumes without becoming believer. Really the word, but he has knowledge of the whole thing. So nevertheless, these are his great teachers, and I was in the seminar with them, and I knew both of them personally, Habermas and Laku. So that is my friend Edmund. Now I would like to offer a toast in gratitude to my family and in gratitude to all my wonderful friends. Where is the toast? Thank you. Toast to both of them that you may do and continue happily, particularly in the next year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
May we all have 20/20 vision.